everyone. Thank you all. So my session today is the importance of change action. We've heard a lot about climate change. We heard a lot about what TCI is doing. Today we're going to hear more about what the region. So I'm going to invite to the stage Honorable Walter Robin, Deputy Premier of Bermuda. We're going to invite Honorable Vincent Wheatley, Minister of Natural Resources, BVI, and our very own Deputy Premier, E.J. Saunders, Minister of Finance. Good afternoon, gentlemen. This conversation of climate change is one that we have really been into today, and I think a lot has been hit. But the purpose of this panel is to really get into more of a conversation about climate change, about what we're actually doing, the ins and outs of it now, and where do we see ourselves going. So my first question, and I'll start with Honorable Wheatley. I'll just start with him today. What are the examples of climate change impacts that your territory has experienced? Since we're talking about climate change and all the issues we've had, we've heard from Honorable Robin about Bermuda and where they've been. We've heard about TCI and where we've been. Let's hear what BVI, with the British Virgin Islands, what have you experienced in regards to climate change?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Good afternoon all. Deputy Premier. I will start by saying that climate change for us in the BVI is nothing abstract at all. It's a reality. And it started in 2017 we had a flood. I think it was August 6th, and 1 month later, in that flood we had about 17 inches of rain within 24 hours. We don't normally get that. And then 1 month later, we had 2 Category 5 hurricanes. 1 month later. Those are unprecedented. At that time, the strongest hurricanes ever recorded in the Atlantic region. So we know what this is. Our buildings, about 90% of the buildings were either totally or partially destroyed. We are still in the rebuild stage, 5 years on. The estimated cost was in the billions, several times or GDP for the BVI. So this is something that we felt this. You see, not to be just theoretical or abstract for us. This is real. To be in your house and just feeling your house being ripped apart bit by bit. Winds 180 miles per hour, 180 miles per hour. The galvanized trees just disappearing. The sea rising up and coming inland with the force. So climate change is very real for us. We've had other impacts. It started even before the hurricanes. We had, I think in 2006, coral bleaching. We lost a lot of coral in the BVI. And since then, we've had stony coral tissue loss disease that we are currently fighting. And even before that, if you go back to, I think, 1981, where we lost the black sea urchins, and they began coming back again, must have been 5 years ago. And we are now noticing they're starting to disappear again.
Yeah, thank you. That's a lot of tangible aspects. Yeah. I think we think theoretically a lot of times when we think of climate change in the abstract. My next one is something that we always seem to lose track of and trying to reconcile: money. And in regards to money, I want us to talk about, given that our general economies are driven by our environment, no matter how we want to cover it, shape it, no matter what sector we're in, it is driven by our environment. If we have a stable environment, if we have stable shorelines, et cetera, our tourism booms, we have better food security, all of these things. How can we look at maintaining our economic security given climate change? And I'm going to turn these questions to the Honorable Saunders and the Honorable Robin as deputy leaders of their countries, of what is it in the economy scale when we think of it, how are we going to maintain our standards? On the side, you sir. Yes. No, that one is yours. Yeah.
Thank you, Deputy Premier. Thank you, Moderator. According to the last IPCC report that I've read, something like over $500 billion of climate-related disaster, climate-related costs of disaster year over year is what the world experiences. So the impacts of climate change and what many of our islands are exposed to are costly. This clearly puts a severe stress on fiscal assets, because essentially it's quite possible, because of all the mitigating requirements that seem to be accumulating, such as damages to coral, because of sea temperature rise, the presence of invasives that may come into your marine environment or even on land for like different reasons, and just the overall pressures on infrastructure that is damaged, it has to be replaced potentially year on year. We know that the Caribbean, every year, no matter what happens, the possibility of hurricane damage is certain. It's not hypothetical, as the minister has said. So these are costs that clearly every island, and even Bermuda, although we perhaps don't get hit as much as the islands here within the Caribbean proper, we also have had to deal with that, with major infrastructure damage from severe storms and hurricanes, and all essentially climate related. We've had a more dramatic occurrence of severe storm pressure as well. Last year, a Category 5 was coming our way, so we just dodged a bullet. If that had hit us, it would have been the most severe storm, I believe, in the Atlantic for many, many years, if it had hit us. But clearly, the damage that has to be mitigated for our island is almost as if we almost have to have our own contingency fund set up. But those are funds that you might have to take from, unfortunately, health and social programs to deal with that when you get the damage. That is the cost that this sort of circumstance brings to us. So clearly, it's going to mean adjusting priorities. That's why understanding the risks that we face is important, so that we can properly plan fiscally for these likely events as they may come. It's like difficult because you're almost dealing with what you're not sure is going to happen. If you luckily get past a year where you don't have severe storm damage, but there may be other things that you have to deal with, such as you have issues that increase, that like impact your fisheries. One of the impacts we've had recently that we've noticed is that our lobster fisheries have become, over the last couple of years, depleted. Clearly something associated with a change in the marine environment, and by extension, potentially climate related. Yes. Because even our individual fishermen can only fish so much lobsters. Yes. So it's not like they're depleting them, but we have a lobster season like you do. So we're seeing the impact on our fisheries. Those are costs that have to be borne as you try and mitigate or take action to reverse those sort of issues. And so islands are going to have to potentially plan for, and this is where the efforts of the islands has been important on mitigation and loss, is that we need to have support either by working together or potentially sources of revenue or grants that we can gain internationally to support the costs of things that we actually aren't responsible for necessarily, which is the damage from volatile storms, from the change in marine environment, our biodiversity within our marine environment, which ultimately impacts the economic livelihood and security of the country. So these are costs we're going to have to bear. I don't have any silver bullet plan for it, but I know that this is what we're facing, and we're going to have to plan and find ways to address, mitigate, and take care of those costs as they come along.
Thank you. Honorable Saunders?
Thank you. But before I go and answer the question, let me apologize the fact that I look far less than all of you beautiful people out there and over here. I just was traveling, so I don't look as nice as my Bermudian and BVI counterparts. I know because my country, I don't want them thinking that I let them down. Now, getting to the question, I mean, how do we protect the fiscal stability of the country in light of climate change? I think it's what he said is exactly the case in terms of the things we can control. But there's some things that we can control, and we have to look at it, I would say, from a carrot and stick type of view, but I'm going to put quotations around the stick. We know where we need to do. For instance, as an example, we know that we need to move to recyclable and renewable energy as an example. And so we have to de-incentivize persons for wanting to use fossil fuels and move them and incentivize them for using renewable energy. And one of the things I wanted to do and would like to be able to do is bring down the cost of importing, as an example, electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles almost to zero, outside of what you're paying for it. And so that's a huge incentive for persons to go electric. Now, because we're still using diesel generation, I don't know if we are just moving the cost from the fuel tank, from the fuel pump to the outlet, and it's the same impact onto the environment. I did a survey and and it came back that it's less impact on the environment to use electric vehicles, even if the power source is being generated by fossil fuels. But if we can get it to a point where the generation of our electricity is renewable, and then you're using something like electric vehicles, you'd be a huge way. And then that goes over for a number of things. The other area in terms of the things that we use, everyday usage, and that ends up inside landfills. Ideally, I would like for us to be able to get to a point where we take out of the environment what we put into it. So we came here. So the thing for me is that something is either reusable, or recyclable, and those that you can't reuse and recycle, then it must be biodegradable. And if it's not biodegradable and usable and recyclable, then something like metals and batteries and electronics and stuff, then you find a way to get it out of our environment. So a huge circular process. You bring it in and we find a way to get it back out. And we want to incentivize those things. And I think that's the way you protect your environment, because what we sell is the environment. People come here and they want to see beautiful water that looks like Listerine, as they say. But in order to stop that, we have to make sure that there's nothing leaching into the water from landfills and those things. And so I get back to it is that we have to do a stick and carrot approach where we hugely incentivize good behavior. Now, we can't control all of the things that are happening around us. We're so tiny on the planet, so the things that cause hurricanes and all the major climate change, we can't control those things. But one of the things that we can control is we can control the things that land in our landfills, the things that end up in our waters, and how on the side of the road, one of the things that I hate and that completely amazes me is that how you would have a middle of the medium where no one should be walking, and that you'd find bottles there.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, how did those bottles get in the middle of the medium? And so those sorts of behaviors, we should completely penalize people with it. If you're seen on a CCTV camera throwing garbage into the medium, we should name and shame you, for lack of a better thing, and penalize you really hard. And so that's what we get back to. So I would end by saying, to protect country fiscally, we make the barrier very, very high for doing the bad things. I don't want to say sin tax, but health tax. We raise the taxes very high for you to doing the things that's going to hurt the environment, but we remove all the barriers for you to do the good things. I would have been, as an example, like I said, electric vehicles. We should be setting a target saying by 2030, 50% of the cars on the roads or something should be all electric or hybrid, and do everything that we can to make that happen.
Yes, I think we had that conversation just yesterday, but we are for time. But I have one that I think a question that we really need to sort of bring back home, and I will start with you, Honorable Sanders, again, is as a region, and this was touched on in Honorable Rubin's speech, what do you think our role, like you said, we're a small territory, we aren't the major contributors, but we are the major feelers of everything climate, stronger storms, etc. How do you think, or how do you see our collaboration, or what do you think a collaboration between the overseas territories, and maybe by extension, the Caribbean advocating, and how we can work together to advocate to address climate change as overseas territories in the region?
One of the things that Prime Minister Motley has talked about is climate justice. The only way we're going to be able to have any impact is if we work together. Because if we go to the UK, I can certainly say if we went to the UK and said something to the UK or the European Union or whatever, they will probably be polite and say, yeah. Well, I'll give you an example. I probably shouldn't say this, but when we were in the UK last November, I remember speaking to the overseas territory, the Premier was speaking to the overseas territory minister. And she was very polite. She's like, yes. I need to speak with my people about that, but I'll get back to you on it. So she committed to nothing. And what I'm trying to say is that we were asking for anything more than that. Certainly they wouldn't give you more than that. They wouldn't give you more than yes, but we need to speak to our people and get back to you on it. But if you come as a region, and say, listen, we're sitting as a region, we're not going to leave until we work this deal out. They'll be far more useful to deal with you than being just polite. And I think that's one of the reasons what we've been bad at in the Caribbean is that we've been very bad at coming together as a region. CARICOM has tried it, but we've done very, very bad coming together as a region and saying, we are here with Bermuda, we're here with BVI, we're not leaving, even though BVI got the hardest impact, or we're all standing in solidarity with all of us, and we're not going to move until we get this deal signed, until we get measures that benefit us. But a lot of times we come when something really hurts one of us, and the other ones are sitting on the side saying, we don't want to upset the apple cart. So from a negotiations point of view, it's very important that we show up as a region and saying we're standing in solidarity with each other, and until the region gets what we think is beneficial, none of us are moving.
I don't know if anybody wants to come behind and add a little something into it, but
There isn't much to add.
yeah, I think
The Deputy Premier has said it in a way that I think has been echoed already at this forum.
yes.
In that working together, leveraging the value we have in the wider global process, we can achieve. But we also must we must have an imperative to be independent in how we deal with some of the issues as well. It can't be all leverage for us to get from someone else. Working together must also be to leveraging what we have available amongst each other and using it wisely to reach the goals as well, because that we'll get nothing from, and we must almost go to the international community like we're not expecting anything. So we must prepare to do what we can with what we have.
Very good. Wheatley.
Yeah, there's very little left to be said. It is very true. The Caribbean islands, we are the least polluters, but we're in the front line for the effects of climate change. And apart from showing a united front too, whether it be the EU or the UK, it's important that we also do what we can in our respective jurisdictions. If we come together like this, we share expertise, we share resources, we share ideas, methodologies, and we just support each other in what we're trying to do. At the end of the day, we're all in this together. So when we show that united front, it is so important. We be a charter today, we're going to get a charter. We're going to try to make sure we all share a similar charter. You don't do a little tweaking with it. That when we have to get help from anyone else, it's a united call. Like Honorable Sanders said, one voice,
Yes.
united.
Thank you. Everyone, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. If we have any questions, we're open to take one question from the audience. Is there one question in the audience, if there's one? No? Well, gentlemen, thank you very, very much. It was enlightening.